understanding what my client journey and what my role was.
Giving clients autonomy over their own program and their own success.
Intensity is a skill. The goal isn't to retain clients forever.
Hey, what's up, guys? Welcome to the Strength Connection podcast. I'm your host, Michael Kurkowski. All right, let's get right to it. So today I have Ray Gorman with me. Ray Gorman is the founder of Engage Movement, and he joins me on the show today to talk all things training and strength. Ray's a physical therapist and strength coach who's doing something I'm very passionate about, which is bridging the gap between clinical rehabilitation and physical fitness. So after graduating PT school and beginning to work in the field, he saw a major issue in how physical therapy was being generally done, focusing so much on how many visits a person gets instead of the results. So he transitioned from an insurance-based model to cash-based, which evolved into his program of working both in-person and virtual with clients. He's seen great results from this model, so I was excited to hear about it, how it came about, and how he now teaches the structure to other coaches. So with that, we'll get right to it. If you like this episode, you want to show the podcast some love, please rate and review it wherever you're listening, and don't forget to subscribe. You can catch all new episodes that are dropped every week. All right, thank you very much, guys. Now let's get on with the show.
What's up, everybody? Welcome back to the podcast. And Ray, so good to meet you, man. I'm excited to chat.
Michael, thank you for having me on, man. It's great to connect.
Yeah, no, we were just going for a while off air. I was like, we could just keep rolling. We have kind of similar paths in many ways of business development and experience. And I gotta say, I'm excited to chat with you. I know we talked briefly a couple of weeks ago, kind of setting this up, and you know what you're doing of blending the worlds of physical therapy and fitness together. It's always been a passion of mine, and it gets me really excited because I saw this years ago before it seemed like it was really talked about a lot. I was like, I think this is a way of, these aren't two businesses that need to be at odds with each other. They should be working together, so much. And I know you're doing a lot of that. So I'm excited to talk about your journey, everything you're doing with Engage Movement and work. So yeah, this should be fun.
Yeah. Thank you, man. It's been a journey, but I think that's kind of the ultimate story for everyone, is like, you collect these little experiences along the way that ultimately lead you into, hey, there's this problem that I need to solve, and it's how your business kind of gets created. So
yeah. So all right, so we're going to get into a few interesting topics here with your retention programming model. To kick it off, I really love to hear how this all gets started, for you, and kind of where your passion was. So if people just jump quickly through the intro, you're a doctor of physical therapy, also a strength and conditioning coach, been in this world for a while on both, and then really ended up wanting to build a cash-based system, and now working with a hybrid-based model of really in-person plus the online in physical therapy, which for me is it seems like it's a relatively new based term of kind of the whole business, but we'll get into all that. I'm jumping ahead way too much here. So to kick this off, Ray, like, how did this all get started for you? Did you want to be a physical therapist for a while? Were you just more into fitness right off the bat? How did it come about?
Yeah, I think like a lot of budding PTs or aspiring PTs, the initial dream was med school. And then you get into college and you're like, wait, how much more school is that? And, at 18 years old, I got to say, I just wasn't dedicated enough for that track. So I was always kind of into the fitness aspect. I was always kind of into, athletics and sports and performance. And I was like, oh, like being a sports PT sounds cool. Being a performance PT sounds cool. And that's kind of everybody's starting point. 2008, while I was in college, I tore my ACL, and I actually went through the PT process, which was both terrifying and awesome, because I really got to empathize what that experience was like. And it's a characteristic and a trait that I've kind of brought with me of like, whatever I'm going to be giving to my clients, I should be experiencing myself to some degree.
Right. How'd you tear it?
Playing soccer.
Okay.
So I was wearing cleats on turf. I got kind of pinned between two people, planted, twisted, pop, ACL.
Oh
MCL.
God, such a familiar story. I know that sucks.
And and so throughout the rehab experience, like it was good, but as I got to the end phase, I remember going into the clinic and I was like, man, like the stuff that I'm doing in the gym is harder than what I'm doing at physical therapy. And like, nobody's really watching me because one, I know what I'm doing. I'm not doing anything dangerous. I'm not putting my graft at risk anymore. Like, why couldn't they just write a program for me that I would do on my own? Like that thought was kind of going through my head, but it wasn't fully formed yet. Now looking back, I'm like, that was the seed. So fast forward, I had kind of gotten to the CrossFit space and I was really able to start elevating my training and experimenting a lot with different programming modalities, learning strength training, learning conditioning principles. And I was like, man, like this is awesome. If I could just do this, like that would be great. Like forget about, maybe going to PT school. A buddy of mine and I almost opened a gym and we ran into some permitting issues, which I'm kind of glad that fell apart because then it kind of allowed me to go into school. So 2014, I go to PT school, I graduate, and about a year in, I'm kind of like, is this going to be my life? Right? Is it going to be khakis and polo, walking into the same building for the rest of time, seeing, 12 to 15, 18, 20 patients per day?
Yep.
Is that it, like kind of forever? And I kind of had like this existential career crisis 1 year in. And so I had opened a side hustle, cash-based business. And that was purely in person. It was one-on-one. And I was working with CrossFitters, Olympic weightlifters, and power lifters. And, in the cash-based model, they kind of tell you do an hour, right? Like that's the value. It's an hour of care and it's one-on-one. And I did my first hour session and I was like, what the hell am I going to do for an hour with these people who already have an extensive training week, already know a lot of these exercises? And so I actually condensed my time frame to 30 minutes, which created some more operational challenges, right? Fast forward, I started working with a company that was doing a little bit of stuff online, and they were what I was doing with them was fully online. I was like, well, why don't I offer this kind of blended service of you come to see me for what you need in person, and then I write for you what I now call a prescriptive exercise program that runs lateral to your in-person visit.
Sure.
And that's kind of become what is now known as the retention programming model.
Awesome.
Yeah. So it just allowed me to truly get my clients what they needed, which was sometimes in person, real-time feedback, and sometimes just management throughout the week.
Sure. When you were in the space for the year, not the cash-based side hustle that you're doing, but others, was there a restrictive feeling you felt from what you could do with clients that were coming to see you? Or was it more like that angst of, oh my gosh, like I just don't like this model? Like, what was it about that? Like, did you feel like I wasn't being able to give as much as I could to these clients?
Definitely a little bit of both, right?
Sure.
And like the clinic that I worked at was great. My boss at that time is still somebody that I keep in touch with to this day. It's the model in general where it's my care is dictated by insurance.
Yeah.
They're going to tell me when my client's done. They're going to tell me what they pay for. And the person that I wanted to work with was a little bit more on the higher performance end. And our clinic just really wasn't set up for that. We didn't have a squat rack. We didn't have weights that went beyond 50 pounds. I couldn't look at the things that I really wanted to look at. And so it kind of allowed me to value proposition the two experiences of saying like, well, look, you could come see me in the insurance clinic where, I can work with you, but we can't really do X, Y, and Z. And I'm only going to get to spend 15 to 20 minutes with you before you got to go work with my tech. And then, or you can come see me at, my cash-based clinic where we can do whatever we want.
Right. Exactly. Out of pocket.
The world is our oyster. And I can see you do pull-ups. I can see you do a snatch. I can see you do a clean and jerk. I can test, rep maxes if I want to see if there's some sort of technical breakdown.
Yeah.
And that was just amazing, and there was more traditional clinical practice after that year. but it just, nothing ever gave me that itch of like freedom, like being on my own.
Sure. Are places, I mean, it just in general, I guess, with an insurance-based model, like, is there some almost kind of scared feelings behind doing things like rep maxes or pushing more because like the insurance could give some pushback? Or
For sure.
like, do you feel like you feel like you're shackled a little bit in like all the things that you can do for people?
Yeah, because two things could be true at once, right? Like it could be difficult for you to tie your shoes, but you're still able to deadlift. But if the insurance company is like, well, but Michael, you're able to deadlift this much weight, which means that you can bend over, touch your toes.
Yeah.
Why would you need physical therapy?
Right. It was always so weird for me because I heard this like 'cause when I've always been in the fitness realm of it, being a personal trainer and a strength coach. So everybody that ever came to see me was out of pocket. So it's like, we kind of like, well, we can do what we need to do.
Right.
But I heard from friends who are in physical therapy of this, like, well, if the insurance is paying for a shoulder, like, it could be a shoulder issue, but it might be stemming from something else. It might be a movement compensation. That's the FMS, the SFMA model. Like they go into this, but they were like, well, the insurance won't allow us to do that because it's in there. And I was like, oh my gosh, I couldn't imagine doing that in my practice.
Yeah. And so you got to tie everything back to, function and activities of daily living. And it's like, well, look, like for my clients, the thing that's actually holding them back is this musculoskeletal issue that is preventing them from training, which is then affecting their mental health, which is then affecting their healthy habits. And so that was like kind of where I broke through this wall of like, that's the characteristics of my ideal client. Like they already have a training history. They know what they're wanting to get back to. They've already kind of psychologically committed to like, this is my lifestyle. And now I just need to kind of consult with them on training volume, strength, where are we putting our eggs in which basket? Do you have enough range of motion for the things that you're trying to do? And it was just a game changer for me.
Yeah. When you went to the cash-based model and you said, now you have like an hour and you're like, okay, you changed the model up to do 30 minutes. You mentioned you felt like there was some like issues of doing that as well. What were like the struggles with going from like an hour to the half hour?
Yeah. I mean, look, at that time, it was the trading time for money thing, so my thinking has evolved a lot now, but there's also the way the consumer thinks. So, you go half the time, you potentially go half the revenue. And now you've got to see double the clients.
Right.
So interestingly enough, one of the things that the cash-based realm kind of says to the insurance realm is like, you don't have a treatment model, you have a business model. But the same thing is kind of true in the cash-based realm where it's like, do you actually have an outcome model or do you have a time-based model? Right. So I'll get people that say like, well, look, I'll sell a 12 session package. And if my client's better in 8, like they're just happy and good to go and they don't care about the other 4 visits. That would be like the perfect scenario of like an outcome based.
Okay.
And then I asked them, well, what if they're not better in 12? Do you continue to see them for free? And they're like, well, no, I charge them again. It's like, so, okay. So it only works in your favor then, right? So it's like we have these idealistic things that we think work, but there are some people that do case fees and that is how they do it. But they're like, those are the people that are like, yeah, look, I charge, $5,000. And if you're better in 3 visits, you're better in 3 visits. If it takes me 2 years, it takes me 2 years.
Right. Okay. Yeah. It makes sense. I mean, and I think a lot of, people on both sides, the fitness side and probably the PT side would almost be scared of that model because it's like, it's so, I was in you buy sessions and I was one of the first gyms I remember around that started to understand like a recurring revenue model where we were doing, we were charging a certain amount a month and just put it on an EFT base. And this is your schedule. This is your structure. Amazing. And because, this is dating a bit 15 years ago, but it's still not that long ago where it was like 10 session packages. It was like, and it was just renewing after every 5 weeks or every 4 weeks or so. And you realize it was the whole model of it was just so shaky. There was no foundational ground on it. And it's like,
Yes.
it was, and some people like almost like that nervous energy of like, you needed to be on because then clients won't renew. I was like, yeah, I think there could be a different way of doing this.
Yeah. And I think recurring revenue in the PT realm and in the cash PT realm is almost, unheard of, right? Unless you're really like diversifying where you have a fitness offering as well that is then getting sold. That's not really what my model teaches. But like I said, because I was doing those shorter visits, I was like, I gotta figure out a way to offset that model where, I can still get paid for my time in between the sessions, which then I found was like really where the magic was happening. Like not just in my in-person visits, it was happening, hey, how did this training day go? Okay, we gotta manipulate this variable. We gotta regress you. We gotta repeat it. We gotta progress you, and that was just a game changer for the whole experience for me.
What was the big game changing feel? Was it the outcomes that you were seeing from clients, or was it more on your end of you had the bandwidth to be present in everything that you were doing of trying to build business? Or
both. So again, if I'm looking at returning somebody to, let's just say like running, if I'm looking to return somebody to running, if I'm in a traditional model, right, a traditional PT model, when they're out of pain, they're kind of now done. But what the research shows is they're not actually done, right? Because they have this decreased training load and they're at a risk of re-injury, not from being in pain, but from having this decreased training load.
Yes.
So now what I was able to do was, I could say like, look, hey, Michael, we're kind of done with the in-person stuff, or we're getting close to it. I'd like to transition you over to what I call a prescriptive exercise program so that I can actually control your volume as you ramp back up to running 10, 20 miles per week. And I need to actually have touch points with you 3-4 days a week to build that meaningful volume.
Okay.
Right. So what that allowed me to do is it allowed me to extend my expertise beyond the point of you being out of pain, because we weren't really done. We've now got to recondition you. And one of the game changers for me in my sales process was I would literally draw a graph that would say, when you went to PT before, is this what happened? And I would draw kind of a line at the top and then a sharp decline. That's when they experience pain. I'd say then you kind of didn't do much. You felt good. And then I draw a sharp incline and they'd be like, yeah, that's exactly what happened. So we have this big cliff and then we have this big spike. And then I would draw this gradual line over time that just kind of ramped up over like a 4 to 5 month period. And I'm like, this is what we need to do. And they're like, that makes sense. I'm in. That was it. That was the game changer.
I love that. The visuals of it is so big for everybody in there too. So the transferring from the in-person work and working with people into, as you said, these touch points. I love how you use that term in that, because I agree with it. Was that a challenge for you as a practitioner to kind of go into this model? Because oftentimes I think as professionals, we want people in front of us because you feel like you can control the situation. You can control the narrative a lot from there. That was a challenge for me when I went into my model, because I do a kind of a similar thing. Was that at all apprehensive for you to do that? Or did it just feel like this is where I need to go?
It wasn't, because I was already doing it online with people I had never met before.
Gotcha.
So it was almost like, this is a no-brainer for me. Like I had almost like convinced myself that like, I actually don't need to see you to get results. Like I just need to help you manage your training, because that's the big thing. And in some ways, if I had somebody that was let's say they came in and part of the issue is they're doing too much. They're training 6 days a week. They're doing extra work 2 or 3 days. Now I've got to say, well, hey, I know that you're doing too much, but I actually need you to come in for 1 hour to do work with me. It's almost like counterintuitive.
Absolutely.
I need you to do less, but I need you to come with me so I can prescribe these specific exercises that you can do under my guidance, where I'm like, I had some clients where it's bring you in for the evaluation. Hey, I don't even need to see you in person. Let me just put you straight on this digital management model and let's just work together like that. And they're like, what? Okay. Like that was a game changer.
Yeah. I love that. What's the touch point like? You said like a couple times during the week. Is it a certain amount of time you allocate, or is it just like quick, just kind of check-ins? How do you do that?
Yeah, the touch point is actually just the workout.
Okay.
Right. We go from in person is a synchronous communication model. And digital is just an asynchronous communication model, right? Okay. So meaning that the feedback is delayed of us going back and forth. And so all I need to do is I just need to make sure that you're tolerating the training well. And then if I need to change something on a later date, I can change something on a later date. Well, the chances are if you didn't tolerate, let's say Wednesday's work well, I'm going to see that before you do Wednesday's work again. And so I just need to have a procedure that allows me to capture that touch point prior to you repeating it. And I also tell my clients, in my notes, it's like, if anything in here like bugs you over, a 5 out of 10, just shoot me a message and that kind of sparks the conversation. Right. So we have these same procedures that we would in person, but they're just manipulated over to digitally.
Yeah.
So that allowed me to not run into this problem of, I'm super worried about something, because a client could flare up in front of you just like they could flare up
100.
And now I can say, well, look, Mike, I can actually use the touch points as, a value add, where it's like, well, look, right now you're seeing me once a week, which is costing X amount of dollars. If we transition over to this prescriptive exercise program, you're going to get 3 times the touch points with me for, maybe the same cost or less. And now for me, that gets me trading time for process. That process takes me less time, but gets me the same or even a superior outcome.
Right. I think the piece that's so powerful in this too is giving clients autonomy over their own program and their own success, and I think that's as a young coach, as a experienced coach, I still did this, but where it's like, you feel that people need to be in front of you, like, so you can keep that control. But what you don't realize is you can just as easily be enabling people from it and think that they need to be in front of you for 30 minutes or an hour in order to do it, quote unquote, right. When that's one of the biggest things that bothers me in the fitness industry is everybody's arguing about perfect technique on these things, which like most people, if it doesn't hurt and you're hitting standards on it, just do fucking more of it, like over and over again, and you're going to do it right. And I think that's one thing that you've built into the program that I love is, like you don't need to see me at all. Like you don't need to be enabled down. Follow this plan. Let me know how it goes. And I'll give you my expertise on it. You're paying for expertise, not time. And I think that's something, if we do this as an industry in it overall of connecting with people and showing it, you don't need somebody in front of you every 2 seconds when you're working out or you're getting this in, then you actually give autonomy. And that's when people, I think, really start to excel.
Yeah. And the thing that I always leaned into very heavily as a physical therapist was understanding what my client journey and what my role was. Right? My role is not to go on forever and create dependence. My role is to teach you independence, teach you strategies, help you extract the lessons that we've learned along the way. Sometimes we have the question like, hey, you did too much and you did more than I said. Did you learn the lesson? And everybody thinks that they can control that, but you can't. Your clients are going to have to experiment, explore, and they have to feel like they can do that as well if they're ever going to get back into the real world. That's
how do you do that in a physical therapy standpoint of it? Like you getting return, is it like get out of pain and then we start to explore? Like, do you have a specific system? I'm sure it depends on each person a little bit, their level, like the injury and stuff like that. But how's the model work as far as starting with coming to see you and then, all right, now we're in the the PEP system as you kind of build it out, from there? How does that work?
Yeah, I look at it as a 3-step process: resolve, return, sustain. So the reason why I call the first issue or the first part resolve is like, it's not always pain, right? Like sometimes it's like, I can't get into this position. That was like the cool part about being a performance-based PT was sometimes I had people come to me where it's like, hey, I'm stuck at this plateau. I don't actually have any issues. I need you to systemize it so that you can help me break through this plateau. Then we're going to build this gradual return back to activity, back to sport, back to whatever it is they're looking to do. Doesn't matter if it's hiking, doesn't matter if it's CrossFit, doesn't matter if it's, a field sport. We've got to figure out a graded way to get you back to that. And then we need to sustain. So I want you to have me as a resource where the programming may actually stop, but the guidance and support doesn't. And so the way that we interact changes where maybe it's no longer me writing your strength work and you going back and actually just doing whatever's prescribed in a CrossFit class, for example, or whatever's prescribed in a jiu-jitsu class. Like it doesn't matter.
Sure.
And then our touch point is, how did today go? Like that's the value point. Did today go well? 1 to 10. Did you experience any issues? What did you enjoy? What made you nervous? And we're not coaching that part enough. We're not guiding on that part enough.
So really you get to a point where it's not even about the program anymore. It's just about the touch points. And that goes even another realm into the self-awareness piece.
Yeah. Oh yeah. Because if you're not learning that process, I'm not doing my job. So that's huge for me.
Yeah.
And I've got to teach you, like, I think a lot of people, when they're figuring out how to train, they're like, I'm just going to do whatever. I'm going to go as hard as I can every single time. And it's like, no. Intensity is a skill. You've got to know when you dial it up and know when you dial it back. You've got to know the difference between a training day and a testing day. And the biggest problem that I think both PTs, trainers, clients have is we're always searching for the ceiling when we're kind of at that end phase of rehab. We actually need to establish a floor.
Yes.
And then we need to build off that floor. So I'll tell somebody, I'll say, look, Michael, as we get back into your running program, the first 4 weeks are actually just going to be the same. And they're going to be relatively low. And why are they relatively low? Because I know that the research says you need what is called a chronic workload, which is scored over 4 weeks, to actually build a base off of. So I'm going to take that 4-week average, and then I'm going to progress you. Right? I got to get you, your baseline is no longer there because you've potentially been injured. So if we're just getting you back into running, we may have done some plyometrics. We may have done some jumping. We may have done some light running in the clinic, but we haven't done the volume over the week.
Yes. I love that line you said, intensity as a skill, is so important. And what you said about the floor and the ceiling, I remember when I had Luka Hocevar on the podcast and we were talking about that, of just personal development. Yeah. And his line is always build up your shitty and average days more than your great days. Yeah. And that hits so much and I thought of that with foundational exercises, is if you build that floor up, then you're never going to fall as far down on the bad days when you're not feeling that good. That's where the foundation really comes in. And I love it. Did you kind of have this mindset right off the bat kind of coming out? Because you have a very, there's a lot of wisdom that you have in this, thought process. This took me like 13, 14 years, it felt like, to understand the autonomy aspect and not needing to be as close to clients like as possible.
I think I got that part fairly quick. I had a lot of, I always wanted to get my clients better and get them back. Like I saw that. And I always thought, if I do my clients right, get them back to what they want to go to, they will come back next time. Right. Like, so that's the lifespan of the client. It's, my full system is called the retention programming model.
Yep.
But the goal isn't to retain clients forever. It is to retain clients for the appropriate amount of time so that they're getting the appropriate service. And then when they no longer need you, that's when you say, okay, I'm here if you do.
Yes.
That's how you create a true ecosystem.
Mm-hmm.
Now, a lot of the sports medicine stuff that we're talking about, as far as the return to sport, I had excellent mentors when I was at the University of Nevada working in the sports med department and at Nevada Physical Therapy. And again, another clinic that I keep in touch with to this day. But I learned a ton about, tendon health, return to sport. Mm-hmm. And you would see these same things where we would have athletes that would go back to, practice and they'd be, rehabbing a hamstring strain or something. And the story was fairly consistent, okay, well, coach had me run at 70% and then it felt good. And then they had me run at 80%. It felt good. And then they had me run at 90%. It felt good. And then they were like, oh, well, it feels good at 90. You might as well, let's see what 100% feels like. And then boom, they're flared back up.
Oh, yeah.
So it's like, you see these patterns over and over and over again. But when I brought this into the CrossFit space, I really feel like, not a lot of people were bringing it into that space at that time.
Yeah. Do you think it's because that mindset is about finding the ceiling, always pushing to the next level? So this is kind of a different thought process?
There's definitely structural implications around it. Mm-hmm. But I think that, when people are following a program, the programming is kind of built to a standard that it's a relatively healthy individual. Well,
right.
How do I get you back into a group class, which I think is beneficial for your mental health, probably beneficial for your social health. And people just like that type of training. And I can say, okay, well, look, you're telling me the workout is 10 rounds. I want you to do 7 rounds and I want you to take 30 seconds of rest in between each round. That's the change.
Yeah.
And so then it's like, oh, okay, I can do that.
Yeah.
And so it's not super difficult when you have a system and process that allows you to kind of plug into that.
Yeah.
So yeah, there's definitely those things, but CrossFit potentially gets a bad reputation for that, but runners are the worst, right?
100.
Runners are literally out their door and then they're 3 miles from their house and they're like, oh crap, now I got to run back.
Absolutely. Because
it's not just a one program issue. It's a mental thing. It's a you got to give them the skill set to understand how to manage that.
Yeah. Funny. Oh my gosh. It's funny because endurance athletes, I love you guys so much, but it's like, you can go, oh, I'm just going to take a nice, easy run. Then it starts to get a little warm. You feel good. Oh, I'm good. I can get the next 4 miles in here. No problem.
Yeah.
I love what you said there about you get to that point where, okay, you don't need me anymore. I'm here if you want. And again, I think it's such an important message for, coaches to hear. My friend Chris Mattice has a great line when he says, my goal is to create the most beautiful breakup. Mm-hmm. Where we get to a point where you're like, thank you so much. We got everything here. And you're like, absolutely. Yeah. I'm here if you want to continue, if you need, whatever. And I always heard that about the term retention. It's not preventing people from leaving you. It's giving them a reason they want to stay.
Yeah. And I think it kind of goes from your sales process kind of goes from people who both need what you have and want what you have mm-hmm. to potentially people who just want what you have. Right. And what tends to happen is, when somebody is in pain, the cost of the program it doesn't matter, right? It's like, I'll pay whatever to get out of this because the value of solving that problem is so high.
100. Mm-hmm.
And if you keep selling the same process as they feel better, what happens is the value starts to drop and the cost starts to creep. And the moment that those two things cross, where cost is now exceeding value, I think is where you lose trust. Mm-hmm. And so there's a couple ways that I can manage that. Is I can make the service potentially cost less, right? So it's like, okay, I understand we're solving a different problem, or I can also change the delivery mechanism of the service to solve a different problem, but be at a similar price point. That's kind of what the model that I have does, right? It's like we go from this in-person to this potential blended of in-person and digital to now it's just fully digital and, everybody's happy, right?
Yeah.
Because it's a different process for a different problem.
Yeah. Do you explain that process in whole when you speak to somebody for the first time, like as part of the consultation and the sales process?
You have to.
Yeah.
Even if they're not appropriate for it in the moment, you have to frame that this is your journey, because otherwise they're going to feel like they are being upsold something later.
Right.
So, my sales process kind of goes twofold. Like the transition into my sales process kind of goes twofold, where it's like, if I'm understanding correctly, these are your goals. This is the thing that it's preventing you from doing. And this is what you'd like to get back to. Are we on the same page? And they're going to be like, yeah, that's it. And, over time, like I'm going to want to have some management strategy that is in person and then blends into this digital aspect where you don't actually have to be here. Like, is that something that you're on board with? So what I think a lot of people do is they just go into their pitch without getting the confirmation of, does that plan sound like it's going to work for you? So then if they say yes, I'm going to say, okay, Mike, well, what I think we should do is I think we should start with, let's say 10 visits. I think the first 5 are really just going to be me and you kind of working together one-on-one, resolving this issue. Around visit 5, I'm going to recommend that we layer in what I call a prescriptive exercise program. And that's going to extend outside of our time together in person and go beyond our time in person.
Yeah. And
now they're already thinking, okay, something is coming down the road around visit 5, right? And then there are other clients where I say, I recommend that we start this right now and we just either don't do as many visits or don't do as frequent of visits. Or there's people where I say, no visits, let's go straight to digital.
Yeah. I love that. When I talk with Michael Chu, who has Champion Development Program, he has a similar model that I love where it explains like a 2-year journey out for the person. Yeah. This is where it's going to be. And I think often, I don't know, because you work with people developing this program, specifically professionals. Do they struggle with this sales process? Are they I know a lot of trainers are very averse to the sales process, with it. I don't know if you've seen the same thing, but I've always been in that mind of like, don't fully paint the picture. I'll paint it with them so they can feel like they want to get out of pain right now. Right. And that's the biggest, motivator of change, getting out of immediate pain. But explaining this over so they feel a part of it, like that's a really powerful thing. Like they can see the value and the steps going forward afterwards.
Well, once you understand that your reputation is on the line, I think that it becomes easier to sell. I think PTs, physical therapists, are very sales adverse because we are altruistic in nature. We got in this profession to help somebody. And what ends up happening is, the PT ends up being the person that's struggling because they're not charging enough. They're burning themselves out because they're having to see a crazy amount of volume. And so once we understand that exists and that we figure out a sales process, right? I actually do teach them sales skills and a sales process in the course, in working with them so that they have a higher close rate after their evaluation.
Yeah.
Right. And that's pivotal. But I think a lot of the sales hesitancy is, one, like you don't necessarily value the service that you sell because you don't need it. You already possess the knowledge. So you're like, well, if I got hurt, would I pay that? Well, you have the knowledge. There's no gap. Yeah. Like you potentially know what you need to do.
Yep.
So that's one of the problems. And then the other problems is like, it's a lot of money to them at first. Like saying a number in the thousands of dollars is a lot of money, but it might not be to your client.
Exactly. That's head trash.
So they're preventing themselves from saying this number based on their belief of what a lot of money is. And they're holding themselves back. And then the third thing is they just don't know how to get themselves out of any objections. Yeah. And so they hear an objection of like, oh, that's a lot of money. And it's like, oh yeah. Well, what if I give you a discount? Instead of saying, well, like, yeah, it is a lot of money. Is the problem the money today, or is it the money like just in general?
Exactly. Yeah.
So it's, you give them that skills and then boom, it bursts open for them.
It is. It's always funny. I mean, with talking to people about money, because some people just have, I mean, there's so much head trash about it from so many people, but I had a theory about it. I'd be curious about, you, because I think people get into the fitness world, they get into PT, like, cause you want to help people, right? You're a people-based person. You want to connect with others, but the way you get taught how to be a clinician or a practitioner is very much like an engineer. It's like, so it's very like thing oriented. So all of a sudden now you look at somebody not as Linda, but you look at them as that knee injury or that 30-pound weight loss. You look at it like a thing. Mm-hmm. And all of a sudden the empathy goes away a bit, where the main thing about sales is about putting yourself as a human being, saying, all right, this person's in pain. Maybe it's physical pain, maybe it's emotional pain, but they're in pain. Okay, where's the gap of it? How big is that? And it seems like, so I'm always curious about that. Like, we seem like we all get into this business because we're people, but in order to actually become a professional in it, you need to go into this other side of your brain.
Totally. I will drill my clients all the time when they're telling me about, we kind of break down a sales conversation and what's happening with them and everything. And I'm like, what's their problem? And a lot of times I hear like, oh, well, like their thoracic spine isn't rotating. Mm-hmm. And so they're not able to get into full shoulder flexion, and that's bugging. And I'm like, no. What's their problem? Mm-hmm. And they're like, well, what do you mean? And I'm like, well, what are they having trouble doing? Like, you're selling the solution to that. The biomechanics is fun for you. Like that's for you.
Yes.
What's it for the client? Right. Like we've got to make it a little bit more layman's terms for them and say, look, part of the game plan is, we're going to work on some range of motion. We're going to work on some strengthening and all of this so that your shoulder works a little bit better so you can do X, Y, and Z.
Yeah.
It's got to be simple like that.
Yeah. It's funny. There was a story of one of my old trainers I worked with a woman. She was a receptionist at a law firm, and she came in and she had terrible neck pain. And we did a lot of work with FMS. So we had people coming in for managing pain through fitness. And for a bit, like, she could not figure out how to get this woman out of pain. She was coming in and they would do stuff and she felt great after every session. Oh my God, I feel awesome. Thanks so much. And then would come back the next day. And sure enough, like the next session, it was back again. Till finally once, I forget how it happened, but she ended up stopping by her work and realized that she had a phone. And every time she picked up the phone, she was doing like the shoulder technique with it the entire time. So they went out and they bought a headset for her. That solved the problem. And I was like, that's so funny. It's like the best solution there. You didn't learn in any National Academy of Sports Medicine book. And it wasn't, an eccentric contraction versus an isometric or anything there. It was, you need to go get a fucking headset.
Yeah. Well, I was just having a conversation with somebody yesterday and they're making a transition from insurance-based into cash-based. And, like you use the term of like engineer, but I think the term is just clinical, right? Like it's clinical, like this is what's going on. So this is what I do. And I was like, well, your client like hurt his neck and now he hurt his back. What's going on in his life?
Yeah.
And he's like, I don't know. And I was like, well, you should ask. It's like, well, why? Like, because remember, one of the things from the client attribute profile, this is another concept that we talk about in the course is, what lifestyle factors are coming into play here? And our job is to map those things out and to say like, oh man, like you're training 5 days in a row. Like, did you know that? And when you hear somebody saying like, I'm only training 5 days a week, that's different of 5 days in a row versus 3 days a rest day, 2 days a rest day. Right. So now it's like, well, what's stress like at work? What's stress like at home? Okay. Things are high on both of those aspects.
Yes.
Maybe we should dial back your training just a little bit while those things kind of even out, because your body's interpreting stress as stress and you're interpreting training as a mental, stress reliever, but that's not how your body's interpreting it.
Yes.
So it's really cool when you can start to open their eyes up to those things and they're just like, that makes so much sense. And nobody has ever talked to me like that.
Yeah. It is. It's getting out of that clinical brain that we get into and just looking at the person as what's going on in life. My client model I built for my business, we call it the highway of strength. If you think like the highway, there's 3 different lanes, and one's kind of cruise control, then one is pedal to the metal where you're pushing it more. Yeah. And then there's something in the middle. So I say with every program, we want to stay within the middle lane, but what if it's a right lane day? What if it's crazy stress going on? Yeah. Okay, what can you do in that? For a lot of us, we think it's all or nothing. Either we're getting it done or we don't do anything. And then you feel like a failure. Then it's this just constant cycle where no, there's always an adjustment to work with. And it might be just as much as getting a headset or just looking at what's going on in your life, just sitting down and having that convo. It's like just getting out of that clinical brain for a moment.
Yeah. And the funny part was like, he was kind of like, well, do we just spend our whole session talking? And I was like, maybe, maybe you do, because maybe that's actually what gets you the information to get this person better. Like the exercise stuff, like whatever, yes. get to that later. Like, let's spend some time like, hey, the exercise, like, is that adding more of an issue? Like, let's go back and let's look at our attributes that we can kind of tinker with to see if we can get a result. I'm using the mantra that's like, think like a chemist.
Yeah.
You've got all these different elements that you can manipulate, and you're trying to figure out the formula that gets you the outcome. That's the thing.
Yeah. It's so funny. One of, my coach, Tyler, who we work with nutrition and kind of business development and stuff. And every time we chat and connect, it's like 40 minutes of chatting about life, what's going on. And it's the final, oh yeah, by the way, do this, for it's like, okay, that's great. And it is, it's like, those are transactional things. Like those are, they're a part of it, but that's not the connection that you get with somebody. If you want to be a professional and have a successful business like you developed, it's like treat people like a human being and hope that they succeed so much that they don't need you anymore. Yeah. I think that's the thing. It's like, you want to build your client book of 40 clients and then just, they never leave anymore. It's like, no, graduate them out. Most of them will probably want to stay with you.
Yeah. I think the other big thing, and you kind of touched on this earlier, was like, everybody's so obsessed with selling certainty.
Yeah.
Like everybody's so obsessed with that. And I think in fitness and weight loss, you can be pretty certain if you do these things, you get this outcome, right? Mm-hmm. When it comes to pain management and working with clients and pain, like I actually look at it of like, embrace the uncertainty.
Yeah.
Because if you're selling certainty and you don't get it, there goes your trust.
Yep. Put all your eggs in one basket. Yep.
Put all your eggs in that basket to close the sale, and your client is so bought in that you're the person. And when they don't get it, you're screwed. Instead of saying, look, this is going to be a little process of up and down. And when you have the downs, we need to learn from them. So the downs aren't a bad thing. The downs don't mean you did something wrong. The downs are information. And I need to make sure that you're sharing what was going on around those downs so I can help you have more ups. Like that's just a game. That's just next level.
It's funny. I had a client call the other day about this, and they're saying like, well, so if I do this, then this will be done. I was like, and in my head, I was like, I don't know. I think so. Like, but we're going to figure it out. We'll just go for it. It's like and everything, especially I see it so much in fitness. It's the 6-week transformation, 12-week. And that term right there, transformation, it's like, it's a change program. That's Dax Moy, said that it's like, it's not a transformation. You changed, you made a change. It's like transformation happens over years and years, going through different times of stress, going through all different seasons of life and still managing to get it done. That's when the transformation comes. And it doesn't happen. And you might feel some relief in 5 sessions, but we don't know. That's where, I like what you said there. Around this time, this is when we'll probably be looking at this. Yeah. And that's not certain. It's kind of is certainty, like, because this is what we're going to be looking at around this time, but it's not concrete down. Yeah, by this session, I'll guarantee that you're going to get out of pain and you're going to drop 10 pounds and, all the girls are going to be looking at you again and all the blah, 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 all that type of stuff.
Right. Yeah, it's a process, and you have to embrace that, and you have to navigate it, and you've got to get people bought into being okay with a little uncertainty, or you're selling something that you really can't deliver on.
Yeah, no doubt. Ray, dude, this has been a blast connecting with you, man. I really appreciate you taking the time. I love the work that you're doing. As I said at the beginning, the blending of physical therapy and fitness together, the hybrid based model. I think this is the future of our industry, and you're one of the guys leading it from the front. So appreciate all that you do, man.
Awesome, man. I appreciate it. Thanks, Michael.
Absolutely. If people want to find out more about you, follow your work, check it out, what's the best places that they can go?
Yeah, so I actually have a free training on the retention programming model that you can access on my website if you go to engagemovement.com. And then the best place to connect with me, feel free to send me a message if you have any questions, is Instagram, and that's at Ray Gorman DPT.
Awesome, man. Dude, Thanks so much, Ray. Listeners, go follow Ray. You know where to do so now. I'll catch you guys on the next one. Peace.
Thank you so much for joining me today. I hope you found some great value here. And if you like this episode, please drop a comment and leave us a 5-star rating and review. It does more to build the show than you can imagine. And do not forget to check out and join the Strength Connection Facebook group. In this group, I share the biggest takeaways and lessons from these amazing conversations, as well as training and strength tips for pursuing mastery and fulfillment in life. This group is filled with individuals looking to take full control over their strength, and it's the perfect space to explore new ideas and to share your journey. And you'll also get exclusive access to these Strength Connection Mastery seminars. It's a deep dive into the physical, mental, and spiritual training that you can begin using immediately. So do not wait, go now. Seriously, go. All right, much love to you. Thank you so much, and I'll catch you on the next one.